When I was out there this morning getting the calves some food, I took a hard look at them, and these calves are going to hit the scale pretty hard. They are pretty big. I wouldn't be surprised if, because the whole idea is right now I'll be liquidating calves here in about 2 3 weeks, and so they'll put on weight over the next 2 to 3 weeks. And next week it is I am supposed to be getting rain maybe 3 2 3 days out of the week, with the temperature hovering around 65 70 in the afternoon, 65 75 in the afternoon, and about 45 50 in the evening. So with those conditions, the biomass of the accumulation, I will be fertilizing the grass. So I'll fertilize just a portion of the field. And my whole thing about fertilizing the grass is that you know under during certain weather, during certain environmental conditions, the accumulation of the grass, the biomass accumulation will be better than in other weather conditions. Like if it's blazing hot and there is zero moisture, the grass is not going to be growing. If it's freezing cold outside, even if there is moisture, the grass won't be growing. Oh, and so there's like this margin of opportunity, right? And so during that time, I can fertilize the grass. And my whole thing about using fertilizer is that fertilizer, it using less fertilizer more frequently causes less possible damage to the environment, because the whole thing about fertilizer is that there are multiple ways for a fertilizer to be metabolized by the plant. Okay, the first one is the fertilizer. The molecule of the fertilizer itself needs to come in contact with the root of the plant. That's the first one. Uh, nitrogen can actually be absorbed by the leaf material. Another way is for the molecule, the fertilizer, to become dissolved in water and create a solution, and that solution go through the ground and then come in contact with the root. And the reason that some molecules need to physically be displaced into the soil, and why some molecules need to be turned into a solution and then pushed through the soil, the reason for that, I talk about this all the time, right? The answer is, if you can answer it yourself, that's fantastic. But the answer is because the soil has a charge, and so does the fertilizer. So when you have a soil that is negatively charged, right? The soil is negatively charged. If you use a positive charged fertilizer, that positively charged fertilizer will stick to the will bind itself to the soil. So it will not go through the soil unless you physically displace that soil, or if you get a tremendous amount of water. Like if about about 2 times a year, usually about 2 times a year, there will actually be enough rain to where, like, and you'll know that there's enough rain. Like me on my soil, I will know that there was enough rain for the positively charged fertilizer to have moved through the soil profile. If when I walk around, my foot sinks like a foot into the ground. All right, if I'm walking around and my boot is sinking 6 inches into the ground, that's how I know that that there was enough moisture for the positively charged fertilizer to become displaced into the soil profile. But if you get like 1 inch of rain, like if I got 1 inch of rain right now, all right, it's not really gonna do anything. Okay, the positively charged fertilizer is not really gonna do anything. Okay, and so during certain weather conditions, uh, the biomass accumulation of the plant material will be more optimal. the plant will accumulate more biomass during certain weather conditions. Okay, and so I would reasonably anticipate that if I just put fertilizer on about 7 acres of land out here, on 5 to 7 acres, and I use about maybe about 100 units of fertilizer, somewhere between 75 and 100 units of fertilizer. The weather conditions will be good enough for the plant material to metabolize that fertilizer, and I'll be able to accumulate enough biomass on 7 acres to feed all of these animals 90% of their diet in a good quality grass. And it'll put me it'll just be the most optimal situation that I can consider. Okay. uh the fertilizer will be metabolized by the plant material. The amount of plant material that I grow will be able to feed these animals. The animals, the feed that these animals will get will be of good quality, of sufficient quality. And the whole thing is, in 2 or 3 weeks it'll rain again, and then I can just fertilize a different portion of the field, right? I can just fertilize a different portion of the field, right? I mean, I don't have to fertilize all my grass at the same time. If I just fertilize one portion and then, I fertilize another portion, and then I fertilize another portion, and I just fertilize the field portions at a time. And if I hit a portion of the field where I think that, the field is completely covered in weeds, I can herbicide it, right? And so I'm just going to fertilize portions of the field at a time. And it'll cost me just a couple $100. It'll cost me maybe fertilizer. The last time I went to go buy it, it was $575 a ton. And so I'm gonna grow portions of the grass at a time. In terms of like fertilizer and pollution, right? I talk about this all the time. I think that this is very important to understand. It's if you don't understand fertilizer and et cetera, this is one of the things that are just it's very important to understand is that fertilizer has a positive charge. Okay, from my understanding, phosphorus and potassium, calcium have positive charges. Okay, and nitrogen, nitrate has a negative charge. Okay, and the soil itself has a negative charge. So when you're talking about fertilizer pollution, like if we're talking about fertilizer pollution, I don't put fertilizer anywhere. I don't put any kind of fertilizer anywhere near any body of water. That's one of my big things. Like I don't put any fertilizer in the floodway. I don't put any fertilizer near the ponds. I go out there and I put fertilizer out there. Okay. And I go like the ground over there. I go over there. Okay. And if there's gonna be like some torrential amount of rain, all right, well, I mean, if there's some torrential amount of rain, I mean, but if it rains for a long period of time, like if it just downpours 3 inches for 45 minutes and then the rain is gone, it's the water will not be able to seep into the ground very well. Soil's like a dried beef jerky, right? If you dropped beef jerky into the water, it's not just suddenly going to start absorbing a bunch of water, right? And so I don't put any fertilizer near any body of water. Okay, you really do not want to be throwing fertilizer into water. Even usually it's done on accident, or usually what happens, like farmers aren't going around throwing fertilizer into water. Most of us aren't. All right, a vast majority. Every once in a while, you may have a nutcase, right? Or one or whatever, a nutcase somewhere that thinks whatever. They just going to throw fertilizer into water. But why would you do that, right? Like, why would you knowingly do that? All right, I don't put fertilizer anywhere near water. That's any body of water. I don't put fertilizer anywhere near any body of water. Okay, I'm gonna go like way out that way where there's a patch of grass out that way where the cattle really like to eat the grass. I see them out there all the time, and I'm gonna fertilize that portion way out there. Okay, and fertilizer, positively charged fertilizer. The only real way that you're gonna have positively charged fertilizer pollute the environment is if you accidentally get it into a body of water. Okay, a majority of the time, if you accidentally get it into a body of water, and with negatively charged fertilizer, if you use too much of it in the solution, right? The whole thing about negatively charged fertilizer is that the soil is negatively charged. And so when you have a negatively charged fertilizer, if the solution, right, the negatively charged fertilizer needs to dissolve into the water, and then that water needs to go through the ground. If that solution has too high of a percentage of nitrogen, of nitrite, something like that. If the percentage of nitrogen fertilizer is too high in that solution, some of it will go through the ground, and then that's how you end up with leaching. All right. And so, like me, when I use fertilizer, I'm just gonna fertilize small portions of my field at a time. With 24 cattle, 7 acres of grass is plenty enough to feed 24 cattle, and the whole thing is in a couple of weeks it'll rain again, and then I can fertilize a different portion of the field, and a different portion of the field, and et cetera, et cetera. I'll just fertilize one portion of the field at a time. Okay. And this grass, a lot of it is perennial, and it is propagating itself via its root material. So a lot of this stuff, even if I fertilize the grass way over there, if that grass way over there metabolizes the fertilizer, the grass over here will also benefit from that, because the root material is all connected. So the plant will actually, that's the thing about plants that propagate themselves via root material, right? Is that the plant is entirely one giant plant. A lot of these plants are interconnected with each other via their root material. All right, and that's one of the big benefits. But also, if you have a perennial grass that's growing via its root system, right, the feed values are usually going to be lower, okay, than an annual grass that regerminates every year. An annual grass is a grass that regerminates every year. Okay, it doesn't propagate itself via the root material. It propagates itself with the seed. All right. And so, and usually annual grasses will have higher feed values. But when I took a look at my field, I have a lot of annual grass coming in with the perennial grass as a mix. And so that's fantastic, because I also don't want to put my animals on straight annual grass. Perennial grasses, the feed values may be a little bit lower, but they stay vegetative for a lot longer. They grow back really fast. They cover the ground really well. Annual grasses, they regrow it. They restart from seed every year, but they go to seed, and then they produce that seed, and then the plant dies. But annual grass is when the feed values of the grass, when the plant is first germinating, the feed values of annual grasses are astronomically high. Okay, like dangerous levels high for cattle feed. Okay, so yeah. So having a mixture of the two is very good. I'm very fortunate that I got to have a mixture of the both of them. And actually that's but that's how I'm gonna go about my fertilizer schedule. Okay, I'll fertilize one portion of the field, and then here in a couple of weeks when it rains again, I'll fertilize a different portion of the field, and in a couple of weeks when it, if I need to, I'll fertilize the field again. But 90 unit. I'm thinking about putting about 100 units of fertilizer on my on an acre, so 100 units of fertilizer per acre. And right now, 920, a tonnage of urea right now, from the last time I went, a tonnage of urea was effectively $600, and a tonnage of urea is 920 units of fertilizer. So if I need whatever, if I'm gonna buy 920 units of fertilizer total, then I'll be buying it'll cost me about $600. All right, and so and I may fertilize one portion this week. And also, I fertilized the field. I put a little bit of fertilizer. I didn't really fertilize the field. Okay, I herbicided the field, and while I was herbiciding it, I I use the fertilizer as a delivery system for the herbicide. And so, a good part of this field is already some of it's fertilized already. If I fertilize it again this week, I probably won't have to fertilize it until I probably won't have to fertilize another section of the field. But I mean, these calves, they are going to be eating a lot of it. So, even if I fertilize the field once a month, which I don't, because if you think about it, there will be months where the fertilizing won't do anything. If it's too freaking cold, the fertilizer won't do anything. If it's too hot, the fertilizer won't do anything. Usually, I fertilize maybe 5 or 7 times a year, and I put the animals on grass for about 8 months, 8 to 9 months out of the year. Usually, these animals will eat 8 to 9 months out of a year, 90% of their diet on grass, 80 to, granted that they're over about 450 pounds. All right. If they're real small, I'll feed them grain. All right. I will, make sure that they eat a significant amount of total mixed ration and et cetera, et cetera. And you don't, and with the little calves, you really, you got to be careful with that. But once they're 450 pounds, they'll eat about 90% of their diet on grass about 8 to 9 months out of the year. And so I could fertilize it this week. I'll probably fertilize it again here, maybe maybe in about a month, and that'll cost me about $900. Excuse me, that'll cost me about $600 two times, so $1,200 over 2 months, $600 a month, and I'll feed them a little bit of grain. Okay, usually my feed costs come out to be about $25 a month per animal. Usually, okay. I pay about $200 a ton for corn. I pay about $300 a ton for distiller grains. For the total mixed ration, I pay 300 and I pay somewhere between 300 and $325. I think last time I paid it was $312 a ton delivered, and the time before that it was $323 a ton delivered. So I paid just about whatever $315 a ton for the feed total mixed ration delivered. But if these animals are eating 90% of their diet on grass, I'll just give them a little bit of corn and I'll just give them a little bit of distilled grain and just call it a day. Right? That's all I'll have to do. And maybe maybe I end up using, I'm not going to end up using a lot of feed. Okay. You know, it's not going to, usually it takes me about $25 a month. That's almost always what it averages out to be, about $25 a month per animal. And I was actually thinking about this. One of the things, and I was actually thinking about this, but if I had all of my animals on feed, right? And I talk about this all the time. The whole thing about having animals on a commodity feed stuff is that the commodity feed stuff, it's a I got a little insect right here in this, but the thing about the commodity feed is that if these animals are on a commodity feed, all right, if these animals are on a commodity feed all the time, like if I had to feed all of my animals a commodity feed all the time, I would effectively have to triple my feed usage. Okay. And if I had to feed my animals commodity feed all the time, I would not be able to make any money. I mean, I would be able to make money, but it would be such a small margin that it would become miserable, right? And I talk about this all the time, the whole idea of the cattle feeding business and why it's not, if I did not grow grass, I could not have made it. All right, I'm just gonna be it just is what it is. If I did not grow grass, I would not have made it. I'm not really even in the cattle business. I'm in the grass growing business, okay? And being able to grow grass very well makes me very profitable. All right, that's the thing that really made the difference for me was the growing the grass. And if I had these animals on a commodity feedstuffs all the time, it just, I would hardly make any money. I would be miserable, okay? And and I was actually thinking about that because one of the things that I was thinking about is I should probably, the whole thing is like right now, let's say that I'm on track to have 75 cattle by May, and that would be with zero additional debt. All right, let's say I'm on track to have 75 cattle by May. But let's say that instead of 75 cattle, let's say I use some of the money and I only end up with 70. Does it, and I only reinvested my earnings, okay? I only reinvest my earnings to get there. I don't use any debt. So is that really going to make a difference? I end up with 70 instead of 75. That's the whole thing about I should just use some of the money, right? I was talking about this yesterday. If, and the thing about the waves of money and the ever increasing size of the waves is that when I reinvest my earnings back into my business, when I reinvest my earnings back into the business, the size of my herd expands. And this was also something that I was thinking about. And I've already said that the whole idea is with the leftover money, I will be looking to reinvest all of that money back into my business. I've told myself I am going to at least put in the effort to do so. All right. That's the whole idea. And so the thing about this is, like, let's say I bring home, let's just make it an easy number. Let's say I bring home $21,000, right? and I leverage against a third of it. So $7,000, right? The $7,000, I take a loan for whatever, $1.5 million, and I pay $7,000 a month for it. Right? I take a loan for 1.25 million, and I pay $7,000 a month for it. And I take that $1.25 million and I buy myself a piece of land and I buy myself some more cattle. And with the other $14,000 that I have left, if I, the whole idea is to take my money and invest all of my money, right? That's the whole idea. And if whatever money that I need, like if I need $7,000, if I need $7,500, I could just sell three of my animals. All right. I'm not concerned about living expenses simply because my living expenses are so low. I genuinely make enough money in 1 month to pay for an entire year's worth of my expenses. All right. I'm not concerned about my living expenses. All right. For me to even enter financial hot water, I would have to start taking my income sideways and I would have to lose 90% of it. All right. So, this was also something that I was considering. It's like, how should I go about this? Because if I put the $14,000 back into the business, right? If I put the $14,000 back into the business, and let's say I buy 14, that would be my equity, right? So that would be the money going back into the business. So should I leverage against a third of that as well? Is something that I've been considering because that 14 grand. But I mean, there's also, the whole thing about it is that I may not be able to invest all the money. The amount of money that I would have to invest, even right now, like when I take a look at it, just by March or April, May, something like that, I would have to invest almost $1.25 million, almost $200,000 a month. Actually, what is that? What? Yeah, I mean, it's about 1.2 million dollars in the next 5 to 7 months. About the next 5 months, 7 months, something like that. 6 months. It'd be about $200,000 a month, and that would be 1/3. All right, and I would still have like 14,000. And but the thing is that the money is still going upwards. And if I take that 14 grand and I put that money back into my business, that becomes my equity. So that's technically my money as well. Should I leverage against a third of that as well? That's what I'm considering. Because the thing is, right now, the whole thing about the cash and leveraging against the cash, right? The cash in my hand every month, right? I am liquidating a portion of my animals on a monthly basis, and that number on the check is always a lagging indicator, granted that I am focused on growing the size of my herd. If I am growing the size of my herd, that check in my hand will just continuously get bigger. And so that check in my hand is from like a 5% liquidation. All right. It's from a 5% liquidation, and it is a lagging indicator. If I legitimately needed more money, I could just sell more cattle. All right. And so you know so I'm like, should I be but then again, there's a legitimate possibility that I can't even invest all the money that I make. I won't be able to. There's a very legitimate possibility that even if I split my chops open, and so I'm like, maybe I should just start spending the money like right now. I should just spend some money. But here's the thing about spending money, right? Here's the thing about spending money. Right now, I'm sitting here in my F-150. I have an F-150 and I'm sitting in it right now doing what I'm doing, feeding the cattle, right? Hanging out, just living my life, right? If I was in an F-350 right now, would that make a difference? It wouldn't, right? It wouldn't make a difference. The F3, like if I was not in my F-150 right now and I was sitting in an F-350 instead, would that make a difference? It wouldn't, right? So I need to figure out what can I do to make a difference. That's what I need to figure out. If I was sitting in an F-350 right now, it wouldn't make a difference. If I was buying 50 cattle, if I was buying 100 cattle a month and I was selling 25, 50 cattle a month, an F-350 would make a difference because I cannot haul 50 cattle in an F-150. I cannot haul 25 cattle in an F-150. I can, but it's going to take it's going to take multiple trips, and it's just going to be a major pain, right? But right now, if I was in an F-350, would that make a difference? It wouldn't make a difference. So, what can I do with the money? But the waves of money are going to get larger and larger and larger. And even when I take a look at what I'm doing right now, and the whole thing about it is, let's just it's not common sense, right? I'm not going to call it common sense because I feel like that could be condescending for some people, but let's just call it rubbing the two brain cells together, because the cattle business is an extremely simple business. It's extremely simple, right? Like, if my whole thing is, like, most people, the average person is not dumb. The average person is an idiot, right? Like, if I was going to write a book, that would be one of the books that I would write. The average person is not dumb. The average person is an idiot, right? Don't ask anybody for an opinion, right? You'll get further in life if you just. And I'm not saying, like, if you're like a malicious person. Don't become a malicious person. I'm not saying this from a malicious standpoint. You will get further in life if you just, like, legitimately just don't care about what people think. And I know that sounds horrible, but I'm not saying that from a malicious standpoint. The average person is not dumb. The average person is an idiot. All right. Chances are you're not surrounded by a bunch of saints. The chances are, if you go out and you meet 100 people right now, 99 of them aren't going to be a saint. If you legitimately think that the average person is a saint, like, that is genuinely what you think, you're either very naive or you're very dumb. All right. Chances are you're just very naive, because the possibility of you being dumb, it doesn't, it's very, 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 very small percentage. Like, you legitimately, like, if you cannot understand what the S&P 500 is, if you cannot understand that, like, you genuinely cannot understand that the S&P 500 is you just buying a small equity stake in the 500 biggest companies in America, like, you cannot understand that under any circumstance, then there's a possibility that you're dumb. All right, you're buying a small percentage, a tiny minuscule fraction percentage of the 500 biggest companies in America. If you cannot understand that, then sure, you might be dumb. All right, but chances are you do understand that, but the big problem is that you're an idiot. That's the problem. It's not that you're dumb, it's that you're an idiot. It's like, why would you not want to buy a tiny portion? Why would you not want to buy a tiny portion of the greatest economy on the entire planet? Why would you not want to buy that? Right? You're legitimately throwing a net out onto 500 of the biggest companies in the greatest economy on the entire planet. And that's what you're buying. Why would you not buy that? Oh, well, I want to buy myself a new car and I got to pay for my bills. Nobody cares. All right, you're going to die poor. All right, the average person is not dumb. The average person is an idiot. All right, and but maybe that's something I should do. Maybe I should start writing books. What's another book that I could write? Yeah, the average person is not a saint, right? Maybe I write that. Just you'll get further in life if you don't care what people think, right? And don't be a malicious person. I'm not being a malicious person when I talk about this stuff. I'm just talking about it from if you legitimately think that the average person is a saint, then you're either very naive or you're very dumb. All right, I don't care if you died. Have fun with that. All right. I do hope that at one point in your life you do take a look at your situation. And my whole thing is just look to improve, right? Just look to do better for yourself. Don't even compare yourself with anybody. All right. I don't compare myself with anybody. I don't sit here and go, oh my God, it's not fair, because there are people out there that make, whatever, 1,000 times more money than me. Oh my God, that's unfair, right? I don't think about stuff like I don't even consider that. Why would I? I'm freaking rich. All right. It doesn't matter how much money I have. If I went, it doesn't matter how much money I have. It doesn't matter how much money I make. Even if I lost everything, I could redo everything in 30 seconds. Realistically, it would take me about $1,000 to redo everything. If I had $1,000, that is effectively all of the money that I would need to redo everything. Why? Why? Because $1,000. If I went to the bank with my $1,000 and I just took a loan for 50 grand, right? I took a loan for 50 grand. I took a loan for whatever, 50 grand, and I paid, whatever, $100 a month on it for the first 18 months. I could have 50 grand for 10 months. I could pay for that 50 grand for 10 months if I used all of it, and then I just redo everything that I had. What does it matter? It doesn't. All right, understanding how to make money is far more important than just having a set of money, having a set amount of money. If you have money, you can always lose it. It doesn't matter. If you're an idiot, having money is not going to do anything for you. All right. And I am set to make a large amount of money, and the waves of money are getting larger and larger simply because I am reinvesting the money back into my business. There is a very legitimate possibility when I rub the two brain cells together and I think about what's happening, right? What am I, what is happening? And, I rub my two brain cells together, even in the next 2 months, even just over the next 2 months, very well, very legit, over the next 45 days, very legitimate possibility that I end up selling 10 calves and I end up buying 18, and I end up buying 2 loads of grain and 2 tonnages of fertilizer. Oh, just over the next 2 months. When I rub the two brain cells together and I take a look at it, well, here by about March, April, May, something like that, I'll have 70, 75 cattle, something like that, 70 cattle. By about March, April, May, something like March to May, I'll have about 70 cattle, and that 70 cattle will be entirely from me just reinvesting my earnings. I will have a large foundation of equity. And if along the way, if I feel like I'm, and I can just spend some of the money. All right, but that's the things like, what can I do with the money that would actually positively affect my life? If I bought, this is a very good example of of how I think about this. If I bought an F-350 right now and I was, instead of my F-150, I was sitting in an F-350, would that make my life better? It wouldn't. It would make my life better if I had to haul 25, 50 calves at a time. If I was buying 100 calves a month, then sure, an F-350 would make my life better. So what could, and the amount of money that I'm making is constantly going upwards because I am reinvesting the capital back into my business. And if I ever need money, I can just pay myself the money. Whatever the, 7 grand, I'll just sell 3 of my cattle, okay? Whatever it may be. The big idea with the capital is to invest all the money back into my business first. I invest all, it's like, because when you think about it, like, let's say I have $14,000 in my hand, right? And I take that $14,000 and I go and I buy 12 cattle with it. And instead of buying 12, but I mean, but the whole thing about the living expenses is that, and expenses is that, and I don't spend $7,000 a month, okay? And my whole thing about buying a house and buying myself a big piece of land, and the whole idea is that I'm a cattleman, right? Land won't cost me anything, and this is also one of the big things about learning how to you know, but land effectively does not cost me anything. Even if I bought myself a giant piece of land and I bought myself a house, the land will probably more than likely end up making me more money. Granted that I didn't buy like a commercial piece of property in the middle of some major city. All right, the land will probably end up making me more money, even if I bought a 500-acre ranch, half an hour from Dallas, 15, 25 minutes from Dallas, 20 minutes from Dallas, a 500-acre ranch. Chances are I can still make money on it. And if I build something like a house, if I buy myself something like a house, it's not like throwing money into a fire pit. That money that I use to buy the house, if I legitimately want that money back, I can just take a loan against the house and just use the money. All right, it's an equitable asset. Is it a great asset? No. Is it a good asset? No. But it is equitable. And at the end of the day, I do need somewhere to live, right? I do need somewhere to live. And I do want, I am looking to buy myself a nice house, okay, and I will probably end up buying this house on a great big old piece of land, and land, it doesn't cost me anything. Even a truck doesn't cost me anything. A house doesn't cost me anything. And so, in terms of like spending money, I mean, I don't know. How how I don't even know. How do I even spend the amount of money that I make? I don't know. The amount of money that I make, even if I went and bought myself four Lamborghinis, it wouldn't do anything. You know, the only way, and so, but I got to figure out what am I going to do with the capital? Okay. That's one thing that I, need to figure out.